Let's talk about an economic puzzle, one that's playing out on a massive scale. Let's talk about Pakistan. You look at it on paper, and it seems to have everything it needs to be a powerhouse. And yet, it's caught in this endless loop of economic struggle. So we're going to try and figure out why.
First, you just have to wrap your head around the sheer scale here. We're talking about more than 240 million people. But what's really incredible is that over 60% of them are under 30 years old. Seriously, that's not just a number, that is a tidal wave of human potential, of pure energy and ambition.
And that, right there, is the heart of the paradox. With all that youth, all that dynamism, why does it feel like Pakistan's economy is always just lurching from one crisis to another? Why can't it seem to create enough opportunities for its own people? That is the big question we're going to unpack today.
To really get to the bottom of this, you've got to follow the money. We need to look at where Pakistan gets the foreign currency it absolutely needs to function. And the answer, well, it shows us the first huge structural crack in the system.
Okay, so a huge piece of the puzzle comes down to one word: remittances. This is just the money sent back home by millions of Pakistanis who are working all over the world, from Dubai to Manchester. And look, this isn't just some extra spending money for families. For the entire national economy, it is an absolute lifeline.
And this chart really shows you just how critical that lifeline is. Remittances bring in over $31 billion a year. That is more than double what the country makes from its single biggest export industry, textiles. Just think about that for a second. The biggest source of foreign cash for Pakistan isn't something it makes ourselves, it's the people it sends away.
And that imbalance gets even starker when you look at the whole picture of where the nation's money comes from. You've got remittances and exports bringing in cash from outside the country, but then look at that third slice: domestic taxes. The amount of money the government actually collects from its own economy, it's tiny in comparison.
And here it is. Here's the number that explains so much of the government struggle. It only manages to collect about 10.6% of its entire economic output in taxes. That creates this incredibly weak financial foundation, meaning the state is just constantly, chronically short of cash to run the country, let alone build for the future.
So, with such little money coming in, where does it all go? Well, the government has to make some really tough choices. And looking at its spending priorities tells us the next part of the story. First off, there is this massive, crushing weight of past borrowing. Pakistan's public debt is hovering around 70% of its entire economy. Just paying the interest on that debt eats up a gigantic piece of the budget before a single new school gets built or a road gets paved.
I mean, just look at this chart. The picture it paints is, well, it's pretty brutal. Spending on interest payments for old debt is about 4% of the entire economy. Defense spending takes another 2.5%. And then, what's left over for education? For investing in that huge young population we talked about? Less than 1%.
And this really sums up the dilemma, doesn't it? The government is a massive presence in the economy, for sure, but almost all its money is spent paying for the past, that's the debt, and securing the present, that's defense. There's hardly anything left over to actually build the future.
But that still leaves the question, why is tax collection so low in the first place? I mean, how can a country with 240 million people generate so little money for its own government? Well, the answer lies in an economy that, for the most part, you can't even see.
Really, the best way to think about it is that Pakistan has two separate economies running at the same time. You've got the formal one, the registered companies, the official taxpayers, everything that's on the books. But that part of the economy, it doesn't create very many jobs. Then you have the informal economy, the cash and hand work, the unregistered street vendors, the small family businesses. This is where almost 3/4 of the workforce outside of agriculture actually earns a living.
Okay, get ready for this, because this number is probably the most mind-blowing one we're going to talk about. That hidden informal economy, it isn't just some small fringe part of the system. Some estimates say it's actually 64% larger than the entire official economy. The vast majority of economic activity in the country is happening completely off the government's radar.
And the fallout from this is just enormous. Obviously, the government can't tax what it can't see, so it's starved for cash. The people working in the shadow economy have no job security, no pensions, no legal protections. And how can you possibly plan for a country's future when you can't even measure most of its economy? It just creates this vicious cycle of uncertainty that scares off serious investors.
So now let's pull all these threads together. The low taxes, the government spending, this giant hidden economy, and let's bring it back to the human story. back to those millions of young Pakistanis we started with. What does this whole mess actually mean for them?
The logic becomes painfully obvious, doesn't it? Step 1. The formal economy is starved of investment, so it creates very few good jobs. Step 2. Millions of young people are pouring into the workforce every single year looking for one of those jobs. Step 3. The government, starved of tax money, offers basically no safety net if you fail. So what's the logical choice? For so many, it's to leave. It's to become one of those people sending remittances back home, propping up the very same broken system they had to escape.
And, this cycle isn't new. Pakistan has had to go to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, for an emergency bailout more than 20 times. And while those programs might stop the bleeding in the short term, they've never managed to fix these deep structural problems we've been talking about.
So, what does the future hold? Well, it's like the country is balanced on a knife's edge. On one side, you have this immense, undeniable potential, that massive youth population, a fast-growing tech scene, and the incredible support of its people overseas. But on the other side, the risks are just as huge, that crushing debt, constant political instability, and the very real threat of climate change. And that leaves us with the final, crucial question. Can Pakistan finally make the tough choices, the deep reforms it needs to fix its economic engine, to invest in its own people, and to build a real future at home? Or will its greatest, most valuable export continue to be its own citizens? The future of an entire generation really does hang in the balance.